Game controllers. Something that every console has and most people don't give much thought into. These things are our main method of interfacing with the virtual world. Every company tries their hand at reinventing this wheel at least once. At this point, Sony and Microsoft are relatively happy with iterating on a tried and true design, while Nintendo is more experimental with each generation, bringing us things like the weird three-handed N64 controller, or the legendary Wiimote that changed how we think about controllers as a whole with its modular design and accessibility-first philosophy. But I'm not here to make a video about those controllers. The ones that you've already heard about, seen and used yourself for thousands of hours. I'm also not going to beat the dead horse that is talking about subpar third-party controllers like that sticky hip gear one you gave to your little brother or guests, or the Resident Evil chainsaw controller that Selena used to play Tekken 7 on at EVO. No, in this video, I want to talk about unusual first-party controllers. The ones that were intended to be used with their respective console, all a part of the manufacturer's original vision for the experience. I want to start off with the Philips CDI. You probably vaguely know of this console from the infamous Zelda games that were on it, spawning a generation of YouTube poops back in the early days of this site.
You've killed me!
Good.
This console is interesting to me because it had several different types of controller made for it by Philips. Since the CDI was torn between being a multimedia/education-focused machine and a gaming console, the different controllers reflect this rift as well. There are a couple of more traditional style gamepads that really don't look that out of the ordinary. The one I have here in my collection looks pretty close to a Sega Genesis controller, and the other available gamepad looked reminiscent of a Super Nintendo controller. This makes sense given that the CDI was launched during the era of those two titans of console gaming, so why reinvent the wheel? Things get a little odd, however, when we look at the non-gamepad style controllers they released. Obviously modeled to be closer to a TV remote style, these abominations were sure to cause children who just wanted to play Hotel Mario many an aneurysm.
Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi? I hope she made lots of spaghetti.
Moving on a couple of years, Atari's final console, the Jaguar, had a pretty interesting design. The top portion of the controller is normal enough for the time, a D-pad on the left and 3 buttons on the right, again reminiscent of a Genesis controller. But look down and bam, there's a whole keypad on this thing. Now, I know this isn't the first controller design to incorporate a full numpad, but by this point it was 1993. I can forgive the early examples, like in television, because at that point, this was still a novel, untested concept. To see a keypad controller this late is pretty baffling. Some games would come with these overlays you could place on top of the controller that showed you a legend of what the keys do for that specific game. Without these, it would be pretty hard to memorize what each button does. The keys are rubbery and mushy, so not particularly satisfying to press at all, and it's awkward to reach your thumbs down to press specific keys without looking. It's no wonder this design didn't stick around. Next up, the Bandai Palladium. This system never left the shores of Japan, so you most likely aren't familiar with this one. It was less of a gaming machine and more of an interactive anime watching system. The games, so to speak, are unique episodes of anime from series like Dragon Ball Z that pause at certain points to display a menu where you can select how you'd like the story to progress in a choose-your-own-adventure style. As such, the console only supports one controller that actually fits onto the console in a cutout. It's kind of cool having a dedicated spot to keep the controller. As for the gamepad itself, it uses infrared rather than a radio frequency, so it will require a line of sight to the console to register inputs. That's okay though, because it's not like you're playing games that require precise inputs or anything like that. They totally could have just mimicked a TV remote style, but I appreciate that Bandai decided to make something more unique and memorable. Ever heard of the Zavix port? This sports game focused console was sold in 2004 on shopping channels like QVC, prior to Wii Sports hitting the scene. Rather than having a standard controller across games like the Wiimote, the Zavix port instead bundled a different controller with every game. The ones I have are bowling, which came with this giant bowling ball controller, and tennis, which came with 2 tennis racket controllers. The interesting thing about the bowling ball is that it requires no batteries, and the cartridge for the game has this IR sensor sticking out of it that somehow senses you making a throwing motion. Other controllers available for this system include a baseball bat, golf club, boxing gloves, and even an electronic scale. Also, Jackie Chan had a licensed game that came with what appears to be a precursor to the Wii balance board. Finally, I want to mention possibly the worst controller I own, and it's for none other than the dreaded Mattel Hyperscan. If you aren't familiar with this console, the Angry Video Game Nerd has an excellent video on it, and it's a wild enough system that I'm sure I'll make a dedicated video on it myself at some point. But for today, we'll stick to the absolutely atrocious controller that came with it. The funny thing is, at first glance there isn't much to write home about. It looks like your basic 21st century controller design with no strange gimmicks or questionable ergonomics. However, all of that falls apart when you actually hold one in your hands. This thing feels dirt cheap, and the buttons all feel terrible to press with an unsatisfying mush to them. I always laugh at the button labeling too. Instead of the standard ABXY, they're labeled RGBY, each letter representing the color of the button. The triggers are long and unwieldy, and the arms you hold onto are way too small to be comfortable, even for child-sized hands. I actually have a sealed one of these on my shelf that I wasn't originally planning on keeping sealed, but at this point, I might as well. It's not like anyone I know is frothing at the mouth to play multiplayer Interstellar Wrestling League with me anytime soon. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Did I miss any wacky controller designs you were hoping I'd cover in this video? Let me know down in the comments. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It would mean a lot to me. When I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to do a game room tour you won't want to miss. Until next time, thanks for watching.